3 years after 24-year-old Grace Roloff vanished without a trace in Yosemite National Park, her skeletal remains were found curled beneath the roots of a pine tree alongside a journal that hinted at something ancient watching her in the woods. Her final entry ended mid-sentence. Now, another woman has disappeared in the exact same place, and the forest is quiet again. The sun dipped low over the granite cliffs of Yosemite, casting long shadows across the towering pines. It was the summer of 2015, and Grace Roloff, 24 years old, fearless, and in love with nature, stood at the edge of Glacier Point with her camera slung around her neck, chasing that perfect golden hour shot. She had always been different from her siblings, more curious, more intense. Where others saw trees, Grace saw personality in their twisted trunks. Where most hikers passed by the forest in awe, she moved through it as if it were speaking to her, whispering forgotten things through the rustle of its branches. Her fascination had only deepened in the past year. She'd begun reading about strange disappearances in national parks, unexplainable stories lost in ranger reports and redacted files. But for Grace, it wasn't just spooky campfire fodder. It was something real, something calling to her. The Roloff family had come to Yosemite for their annual summer trip. It was a tradition stretching back to Grace's childhood, though this time the group was smaller. Her younger sister, Sophie, now 17, had begged her to stay on the main trail that afternoon. "Don't go off alone again," Sophie said, sensing something she couldn't name. Grace just smiled. "I'll be back before dark. I promise." That was the last thing she ever said to her Dot when Grace didn't return by sundown. The worry set in quickly. Her family split up and searched the trails near Glacier Point, shouting her name into the growing darkness. Nothing, not a footprint, not a dropped lens cap. Park rangers were alerted by nightfall. By morning, a search and rescue operation was in full motion. Helicopters, tracking dogs, volunteers combing every inch of the wilderness. The dogs caught a faint trail, veering off the main path toward a rocky overlook, but it vanished abruptly, as if she had been lifted from the ground. One ranger described it as like chasing a shadow into nothing. The weather remained clear. There were no signs of a fall, no blood, no signs of wildlife activity. Just Grace's sudden and complete disappearance. Days passed. Then weeks. Her family stayed in the park long after the official search was scaled back. Sophie refused to leave, sleeping in a tent near where her sister was last seen, clutching Grace's spare flannel like it might lead her back. She told reporters she wouldn't just leave. She didn't fall. She didn't run. Something else happened. Speculation ran wild. Was it a kidnapping? Did she fake her own disappearance? Fall into a hidden cave? Internet forums lit up with theories. One thread on a missing persons subreddit gained traction. A user claiming to be a former park employee mentioned an area near Glacier Point that had a strange reputation. A place where compasses stopped working and birds refused to land. But no evidence surfaced. The case went cold. Grace Roloff became another name on a growing list of unexplained vanishings in U.S. national parks. Rangers filed her disappearance under unknown circumstances. Her parents held a memorial service that fall, though Sophie refused to attend. "There's no body," she said. "She's still out there." Over time, Yosemite visitors began to share strange stories, whispers of a woman in red, Grace's flannel, seen at the tree line, of camera batteries draining without warning, of songs heard just after midnight, echoing across empty valleys. Rangers, tight-lipped but uneasy, avoided commenting. One veteran, off the record, said he wasn't surprised by the disappearance. "There are places out there where the woods just change," he said. "You go too far off trail, you end up somewhere else. Somewhere that doesn't care if you come back." But none of it brought Grace back. To the world, she was gone. 3 years passed, and Sophie Roloff grew from a girl grieving her sister to a determined young woman chasing answers. She pored over Grace's journals, online theories, and local maps. She noticed patterns Grace had once mentioned: clusters of missing persons, strange weather anomalies, and specific locations near rock formations where trails went cold-dotted. Was Sophie who first heard about the unnamed region near Mount Star King, an area closed off most of the year due to treacherous conditions and minimal foot traffic. She flagged it as a point of interest, but lacked the access to explore it herself. One day, she wrote in her own journal, someone will find her, and it won't be an accident. Little did she know, someone would just not in time, unbeknownst. To Sophie or anyone else, the park itself had kept its secret. Deep in that off-map section of wilderness, past where even the most experienced rangers dared to hike, a remnant of Grace remained. Covered by seasons of pine needles and snowmelt, resting beneath gnarled branches that twisted unnaturally toward the sky, waiting to be found. And beside her, tied to a branch with red twine, her final words lay preserved. Pages no wind had scattered, words no creature had chewed. A message to the world that no one would read. Not yet. The year was 2018. After a brutal winter, Yosemite National Park was finally breathing again. Heavy snow had sealed off large stretches of backcountry for months, including a steep, unmapped region east of Mount Star King terrain too rugged for hikers and too remote even for seasoned rangers. Until now, a team of park rangers, led by veteran field specialist Daniel Vega, was assigned to map snowmelt flow patterns in the newly thawed area. They weren't expecting anything unusual, just runoff paths, rockfall zones, the typical early season hazards. Vega, in his 50s, had seen everything Yosemite had to offer. He didn't put stock in the stories passed around by new recruits' dailies of watchers in the trees, eyes in the bark, places where compasses spun without reason. But everything changed when they found the backpack dot it was resting upright against. A granite slab, faded but intact, as if someone had placed it there deliberately. A red flannel was rolled and strapped to the top. Inside, they found a half-empty water bottle, a cracked compass, a moldy protein bar, and a sealed plastic bag containing a weather-stained leather journal. Stitched into the lining of the bag was a name that froze Vega in place: Grace Roloff. He stared at it for a moment, then carefully opened the journal. Much of the ink had bled with age and weather, but most of the pages were readable. The last dated entry was July 16th, 2015, 2 days after Grace disappeared. "Call it in," Vega said quietly. Not 10 feet away, a young ranger named Kara called out in a shaken voice, "Sir, I've got something." She was standing beneath a gnarled pine tree, roots coiled from the ground like veins, and nestled among the earth and years of forest debris were bones, sun-bleached and long picked clean by the elements. They were curled in a fetal position, as if the person had laid down and simply waited to die. One hand was clutched to the chest, fingers curled inwards like a frozen goodbye. Dental records would confirm it. Grace Roloff had been found. The news broke like a shockwave. "Missing hiker found after 3 years in wilderness," read the headlines. Grace's smiling face frozen in time-dominated news feeds and broadcasts. Yet behind the official statements and sound bites was an unease that no one could name. The autopsy was inconclusive. No signs of trauma, no broken bones, no defensive wounds, no explanation. Grace had been healthy and strong when she vanished. Now she was just another question no one could answer. Her parents, aged and worn down by years of grief, accepted the findings with weary silence. But Sophie Grace's younger sister did not. She read the journal. She saw what her sister had seen, or at least what Grace believed she saw. And it chilled her. The journal started rationally. Day 1, I think I took the wrong trail after the overlook. Can't find my way back, staying put until someone finds me. I know they're looking. Day 2. Something's wrong. I keep hearing footsteps at night. But when I shine my light, nothing's there. I saw lights moving through the trees, not flashlights. Something floaty, not human. Day 3. There's someone out here, or something. It doesn't move like a person. I hear creaking, like wood bending. I started calling it the Barkman. Sounds stupid, I know. But I think it's watching me. After that, the writing grew fragmented and paranoid. Strange symbols filled the margin circles nested in trees, eyes drawn inside roots. One entire page contained nothing but the phrase, "I can't go to sleep." He stands closer when I close my eyes. The final legible entry was jagged and shaky. He doesn't like metal. I left my camera out, and he wouldn't come near. But now the batteries are dead. I think this place isn't part of the park. I think it's older than that. Older than us. Then, he's outside now. I can hear the sentence trailed off into nothing. A week after the discovery, Daniel Vega resigned. No press. No statements. Gone. Kara, the younger ranger, would later tell a friend that something about his face had changed when they left the site. His eyes were empty, like he had seen something his mind wasn't built to hold. She once muttered barely, above a whisper, "We weren't supposed to find her." That place let us in. Just once. After that, she refused to speak of it again. When Sophie passed Grace's journal to Mara Ellings, it was in a sealed envelope, accompanied by a single handwritten note. Tell the truth. All of it. Mara, a sharp and respected investigative journalist, had built her name reporting on strange disappearances and patterns in remote locations. She devoured the journal, cross-referencing every name and symbol. Barkman, floating lights, spiral patterns. There were parallels in folklore from dozens of cultures. Native American oral traditions, Eastern European legends, Norse carvings. All of them referenced an ancient forest guardian, not good, not evil, just territorial. And old, very old. Mara decided she would retrace Grace's path, with ranger clearance. And Sophie's help, she hiked toward the area where Grace's remains had been found. Even before arriving, Mara felt it, the heaviness in the air, the eerie stillness. The trees here were too tall, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just silence. Thick and watchful, the site had remained untouched. The backpack was gone, but the area bore the same weight. Except for one change. A small wooden effigy hung from a low branch, freshly made, suspended with red twine. It hadn't been there during the original recovery. As dusk settled, Mara turned on her recorder. Something is here. Watching. I know how it sounds, but I feel it. Like the air is thicker in this place. I'm leaving before nightfall. But she didn't leave. That night, she stayed in a tent near the clearing, just like Grace had. At midnight, she heard singing. Distant, human, almost a lullaby, soft, unintelligible words floating through the trees. She stepped out of the tent, flashlight in hand, but the beam stuttered, flickered, and died. The air had gone cold. She wasn't alone. Her camera captured only a few seconds of footage before it failed. A silhouette, impossibly tall, bark-like skin, limbs bending at unnatural angles, its presence massive and silent. That footage would never reach the public. Weeks later, a hiker reported a strange sight, something tied to a pine branch with red twine, fluttering in the wind. Rangers recovered it. Another journal, weather-sealed. The handwriting was Mara's. Inside were sketches, notes, symbols. And one final message. The forest remembers, the forest waits. and it never gives back what it takes. Mara Ellings never intended to become the story. When she set out to investigate Grace Roloff's death, it was meant to be a deep-dive feature, a missing hiker found after 3 years, the eerie journal entries, the symbols no one could explain. But after spending just one night at the site of Grace's death, Mara returned changed. A woman who hiked back into civilization was pale, hollow-eyed, and different. She told no one what happened in the forest. She didn't need to. Her footage was corrupted, her GPS data erased, and her notes, what was left of them, were filled with incoherent scrawlings and geometric symbols she couldn't remember writing. Still, she published the piece. It was careful, balanced, and threaded with just enough unease to unsettle readers. It made the front page of multiple outlets. A Forest That Doesn't Forget, it was called. It went viral. And then Mara vanished. 3 months after publication, she failed to return calls, missed deadlines, and was last seen boarding a bus to a small town outside Yosemite. Her editor thought she was chasing another lead. Her sister thought she was, running from whatever followed her out of the woods. Sophie Roloff knew the truth. Mara had gone back to where Grace had died. And this time she hadn't come out, but she left something behind. A ranger discovered it tucked beneath a cairn of stones along the same ridge where Grace's remains had been found. A weatherproof notebook sealed in plastic. The final pages were almost frantic Mara, writing in second person, as if speaking to herself, or maybe to something else. She described whispering trees, the scent of rot without decay, lights that hovered just out of reach, and footsteps that came from nowhere. She mentioned the watcher beneath the bark and the song that pulls you sideways from time. One line, underlined 3 times, read, "Grace wasn't the first. I won't be the last." News of Mara's disappearance revived the case. Internet theorists exploded with new ideas. Some accused the park of hiding something: secret caves, government experiments, occult activity. Others pointed to ancient, native stories of forest spirits who lured travelers into sacred places where the boundary between this world and something older had thinned. The National Park Service gave the expected answer. There is no evidence of foul play. The case remains open. But rangers in Yosemite started avoiding that ridge again, quietly removing it from route suggestions and trail maps. Unofficially, they called it the Hollow. It was Sophie who broke the silence. Now in her early 20s, sharper, harder, shaped by loss, she reached out to a documentary team willing to follow her into the backcountry. She didn't trust journalists anymore. Mara had meant well, but whatever lived in those woods was deeper than ink and cameras. Sophie didn't want to tell a story. She wanted to end one dot. They set out in late September. 3 people. Sophie, a filmmaker named Jonah, and a survival expert, Marcus, who had previously worked in rescue operations. The hike was long, arduous, and silent. Sophie led them with a sense of purpose, following a path not marked on any official map, but etched clearly in her mind, the trail Grace had taken. The air grew colder as they moved off the main routes. Wildlife grew scarce. The birds stopped singing. On the 4th day, they arrived. The forest in this part of Yosemite didn't look strange. At first, tall pines, dense undergrowth, jagged rock. But the deeper they moved, the more unnatural it became. Trees leaned in directions that defied gravity. Moss grew in spiraling patterns across the bark. At night, they heard rustling just outside the ring of firelight. Low creaks. Occasionally, distant laughter. Marcus dismissed it as the wind. Jonah wasn't so sure. Sophie said nothing. On the 6th day, they found the altar dot. It sat in a glade of perfectly still air, made from stone and root, coiled together like something grown rather than built. Markings surrounded it, etched into trees, carved into the rock scrawled into the dirt. Sophie recognized them from both Grace's and Mara's journals. Jonah began filming. Marcus told them to leave. Sophie approached the altar and placed a photo of Grace on its surface. Then, quietly, she began to speak. She didn't call for Grace. She didn't call for Mara. She called for the thing she knew had taken them. Her voice echoed once, then vanished like mist. The woods grew utterly still. Jonah's camera died. Marcus turned to say something, and then froze. There was someone standing at the edge of the clearing. It wasn't a person. It was tall, at least 7 feet humanoid, only in the loosest sense. Its skin was bark, twisted and cracking, with moss growing in the seams. Its eyes were hollow depressions, and yet they watched. Its limbs were too long, its arms hanging low, fingers gnarled like roots. When it moved, it made no sound. But the air shifted, dense and heavy. The scent of rotting leaves filled their lungs. Jonah ran. Marcus stood, frozen, caught between fight and flight. Sophie simply stared. The bark man didn't chase them. He didn't need to. Sophie fell to her knees as the thing moved forward, slow, deliberate, not hostile, but inevitable. She remembered the final words in Mara's notebook. He doesn't kill. He takes. He offers something in return. She spoke again. Take me. Let them go. For a moment, nothing. Then a whisper, not from the creature, but from the trees themselves. No. A wind kicked through the glade. Leaves swirled. The altar cracked down the middle. The creature turned not toward Sophie, but toward the woods and vanished, dissolving between the trees like smoke. Jonah never stopped running. He was found 2 days later, dehydrated and near delirium. He remembered nothing after the clearing. Marcus was found weeks later wandering alone, silent, with symbols carved into his palms. He never spoke again. Sophie was never found. But months later, back at Glacier Point, park ranger discovered something tied to a pine branch with red twine. A journal, weather sealed, the pages written in Sophie's hand. The last entry was calm. Not fearful, resigned. I saw it. I spoke to it. It knows we don't belong here. It guards the in-between places, the folds in the forest where time bleeds and memories rot. Grace wasn't taken. She wandered into something sacred. Mara, too. I offered myself in exchange, but it doesn't barter. It only watches. It only waits. The forest remembers. The forest forgives nothing. If you're reading this, turn back. There are places in this world that are not meant for us. And beneath, the entry, drawn in perfect ink, an eye within the rings of a tree, and beneath it roots reaching out,